Morning, everybody. My name is Brian Cody with Digital Disciple. Thank you for joining us today. And I've been really wanting to talk about this one for a while. This is the book of Revelation. This is a book in the Bible that a lot of pastors won't even preach on. A lot of people won't even talk about. But we're going to talk about it today because, believe it or not, to me it's one of the most important books in the entire Bible. It is the end to the beginning. Genesis is the beginning, Revelation is the end, and every single thing that starts in Genesis ends in Revelation. But it's not the end of us, it's actually a new beginning. It's the coming king. That's what it's the story of. And a lot of people are like, man, there's dragons in there. There's scary stuff in there. I don't want to go into that part. There's a lot of symbolism in there. And there is some scary stuff. But if you're a true believer, before the real bad stuff happens, we're all going to be called up anyway. So I want to talk today about how the Revelation is, believe it or not, it's a book of prophecy. And it's one of the most important books in the Bible because it's a treasure chest. And what do I mean by that? There are 404 verses, right? And in those 404 verses, there are over 800 allusions just to the Old Testament alone. So I'm going to say something else that was probably going to blow your mind. When people come to me and say, man, I haven't really read the Bible, what book do you think I should start in? Revelation is a great book to start in. And I know you're like, are you kidding me right now? Yes, I'm telling you the truth. Revelation is a great book to start in. Because if you read Revelation, and it is Revelation, by the way, not Revelations, it's Revelation. If you read Revelation, you're going to go back into the Bible, into almost every other book and go, is that really in there? What is this talking about? So it's important to get into it. Second thing that people don't understand, a lot of people don't understand, Revelation is a book of God given to Jesus. It says it right in the beginning. It says, the revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave unto him to shew unto his servants things which must shortly come to pass. And he sent and signified it by his angel unto his servant John. See, God gave this book to Jesus, and Jesus signified it and gave it to John so that John could give it to us. That's how important this book is. Here's another thing important about this book. Do you know that Revelation is the only book in the Bible that says, read me, I'm special? It says, if you read this book, you will be blessed. See, a lot of people don't know that either because they get scared away by the signs. They get scared away by some of the symbolism that's in this book. And also, if you know about sevens, 7 is the number of completion. And there's more sevens in Revelation than you could possibly imagine. I'm going to go over some of those in a few minutes. But get into the book of Revelation. This is important. And today we're going to talk about revealing Revelation. Come on. Revelation is also a book in the Bible. Most of the books in the Bible, when you read them, you have to outline them yourself. You have to figure out, what is this book about? But in Revelation, it gives you the outline right at the beginning. It tells you that this book, and he tells John, he says, go tell the people what is, what was, what is, and what is to come. So that's what this book is going to be about. It tells you right in the beginning. This book is about what was, what is, and what's to come. See, that's what the book of Revelation is there for, to tell you these things have happened, these things will happen, and these things are going to happen. And that's what this book is about, and it tells you that right in the beginning. So as long as you understand that, there's nothing to be afraid of. And this is a book of what's to come. There's so much symbolism in here. And I want to read from this next verse, and I'm going to explain to you where Jesus tells John about the symbolism, which shows you, if he tells you right in the beginning of the book, that's what's to come in the rest of the book. So listen to what Jesus says. And you'll find this in 1 Revelations 17. And when I saw him, I fell at his feet as dead. And he laid his right hand upon me, saying unto me, fear not, I am the first and the last, am he that liveth and was dead. And behold, I am alive forevermore. Amen. And have the keys of hell and of death. Write the things which thou hast seen, and the things which are, and the things which shall be hereafter. The mystery of the 7 stars which thou sawest in my right hand, and the 7 golden candlesticks. The 7 stars are the angels of the 7 churches, and the 7 candlesticks which thou sawest are the 7 churches. See, he gives you the symbolism, and then he tells you what it means. That's what this book is. So later on in the book where it says there's a woman who rides the red dragon, in chapter 9, they tell you what the red dragon is. It's Satan. See, these are symbols of things. When it talks about the sun falls from the sky and the mountains go into the sea, those are symbols of what's going to happen. There are some literal things in here, but there's a lot of symbolism. So don't let the symbolism scare you away, because like I said earlier, if you're a true believer, the only thing that's going to happen to us, which by the way is already happening, is you're going to be persecuted by the world for believing in Jesus. See, and that's been happening forever. The church has been persecuted all around the world. Believers have died for just saying that they believe in Jesus. And that's coming here to the United States, to America. That's coming. And be ready for it. And whatever you do, do not deny the Lord for the world. See, because in this country right now, when you profess that you love Jesus Christ, that you're a follower of Jesus Christ, you're already stamped with like, oh, you're one of those people, huh? But let me tell you right now, do not conform to the world like it says in Romans, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And the renewing of your mind begins right here in this book. This is what you follow, this is what you believe, and this is what you profess. Because if you don't, when you profess to the world that, oh no, I want to be like you, then you're going to go down with the world. Because in Revelation, the earth dwellers, meaning the people that choose the world, they die with the world. They don't get to go to heaven. They don't get to go to the new creation, which is what happens in Revelation. There's a new creation. There's a new heaven and a new earth. But the old dies with the old. And if you choose to be an earth dweller, you will die with the earth. There's nothing scary about being a believer. The scary part is not believing. So don't be afraid of this book. The next thing we're going to talk about in this book is how Jesus writes 7 letters to 7 churches. That's what he was speaking of earlier. And there's a lot behind that. So let's talk about it. So the was is when John saw his vision of Jesus, and he spoke about that. The what is happening right now is the 7 letters to the 7 churches. Jesus wrote 7 letters to the 7 churches, and in each one of those letters has 7 parts, and each one of them has a greeting. In every single letter, Jesus says, I see what you're doing. It's amazing. It's the history of the church. And in those 7 letters to those 7 churches, you can find all the qualities, good and bad, about the church you're going to right now. Because those 7 churches encapsulate every single church that ever is, ever will be, and ever was. See, we're living in the time of the church right now. It started back in Acts, and it's been going ever since, all the way through to the end point in Revelation. So in those 7 letters, Jesus, after the greeting and after he says, hey, I see what you're doing, he then says, here's what you're doing good, here's what you need to work on. And at the end of every single letter, he says, to those who have ears, listen. And those are some of the most important words in the Bible. This is what Jesus tells us all the time. Listen. Don't spend so much time speaking that you're not hearing, because there are messages in those letters to every single church. Do you know that the churches that thought they were doing good were doing bad, and the churches who thought they were doing bad were actually doing pretty good? There's 2 churches that he writes letters to that nothing good is said about them. There's 2 churches that he writes letters to that nothing bad is said about them. And in the specific order that he writes those letters, you can literally find the history of the church. From the very first church to the world that we live in now and the churches that we have now. And like I said, in between, there's every single other church. You can find out what's good about the church that you go to and what isn't good about the church that you go to. You just got to be honest with yourself and read those letters. You know, in Revelation, one of the most important verses that ever gets pulled out when people do preach about Revelation, and I've been guilty of this myself, is in Revelation 3:20 and 3:21, where Jesus says, I stand at the door and knock. If you let me in, I will come in and dine with you, and you will dine with me. And people use that to say, hey, Jesus is knocking, just let him in. I've been guilty of that. But you know, if you read that in context, that's one of the churches, Laodicea, that he wrote to, where he doesn't say anything good about them. And what he's saying in that verse actually is, I'm supposed to be in the church, Why am I standing outside knocking, trying to get in? See, he should already be in there. So sometimes the few things that we do pull out of Revelation, we pull it out in the wrong context. That's not a good thing. He's actually criticizing that church in that verse, in that moment, saying, I should already be inside. I shouldn't have to be out here knocking. And in the painting of that picture, there's no knob on the outside. So he can't get in unless the church opens it up from the inside and lets him in. So think about that. That's the time that we're living in right now. Those 7 letters are super important because everything that happens after that, beginning in chapter 4, is what is to come. That's when John gets the vision of heaven, the angels, and all of these things. And we're going to talk about that next, because what's next to come is the coming king, the return of the king. See, there are a lot of good things in this book. Do you know that some of the greatest signs of worship in the entire Bible are in Revelation? You've got the elders throwing crowns at God's feet and singing to him. You've got the angels singing to him constantly, 24 hours a day. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord Almighty. If you want to see what worship looks like, real, true, honest, beautiful worship, you got to get in Revelation. Don't be afraid of this book. Jesus himself told you, read this book, you'll be blessed. He wouldn't tell you to read something that's going to scare you, man. It's to open your eyes. See, as believers, we knew this was coming. And when you pray God's prayer, when you say, thy kingdom come, you're talking about Revelation. If you want his kingdom to come, everything that's in this book has to come to pass. And it will, because it's prophecy. This is a book of prophecy. He calls it that as well in the beginning. You just got to read it. That's all you got to do. So the next thing we're going to talk about is all the amazing things that started in Genesis and they're going to end in Revelation. In Jesus' name. All right, so like we spoke about, we need this to happen. A lot of people read the book of Revelation and they go, man, I don't want any of that stuff to happen, man. Yes, you do. You need that to happen. That's how the new world becomes. That's how we get to heaven. That's how we get the new heaven and the new earth. And so, being the last book of the Word, of the Bible, Revelation closes out everything that started in Genesis. And I'm just going to give you a few examples right here. There's so many more, but these are some of the big ones. So what starts in Genesis ends in Revelation. The earth is created in Genesis 1. The earth passes away in Revelation 21. The sun was to govern the day in Genesis 1. There's no need for the sun in Revelation 21. The darkness he called night in Genesis 1. There is no night according to Revelation 22. The water he calls sea in chapter 1, Genesis. No more sea in chapter 21 of Revelation. There's a river for the earth in chapter 2 of Genesis. There's a river for the new earth in Revelation 22. Man is created in God's image in chapter 1. Man is headed in Satan's image in chapter 13 of Revelation. The entrance of sin in Genesis 3. The end of sin in Revelation 21. Curse announced in Genesis 3. No more curse in Revelation 22. Death enters in Genesis 3. No more death in Revelation 21. Man is driven out of Eden in Genesis 3. Man is restored in Revelation 22. The tree of life is guarded in Genesis 3 so that there would be a right to the tree of life in Revelations 22. Sorrow and suffering enter in Genesis 3. There is no more sorrow in Revelation 22. Nimrod founds Babylon in chapter 10 of Genesis. It falls in chapter 17 of Revelation. Genesis 6 through 9, God's flood to destroy an evil generation. In chapter 12 of Revelation, Satan's flood tries to destroy the elect generation. Genesis, a bowl of God's promise. Revelation, a bowl for remembrance. Sodom and Egypt, representing judgment in chapter 13 in Genesis. Sodom and Egypt, referring to Jerusalem in chapter 11 of Revelations. Confederation against Abraham's people in Genesis 14. A confederation against Abraham's seed in Revelations 12. In Genesis 24, a bride for Abraham's son. Revelations 21, a bride for Abraham's seed. In Genesis 1, marriage of the first Adam. In Revelation, the marriage of the last Adam. Man's dominion ceased and Satan's began in Genesis 3. And in Revelation 22, Satan's reign ended and man's has begun. That's just a few examples of what started in Genesis and ends in Revelation. Revelation is the end of the Bible. It's the beginning of you and I reigning forever and ever in heaven with Jesus. Just think about that. Remember that. Understand that. Revelation is a great book. It's not a bad book. It's a fantastic book. You just have to get into it and learn. There are secrets in there. There are promises in there. There are treasures in there. And you and I are in there. And Jesus is in there. For the rest of eternity, we will spend it with Him. In Jesus' mighty name, amen.